Welcome everyone, and by popular demand, we are reacting this week to one of Mr. Ballen's videos. I know a lot of people have been asking. My name is Gus.
Hey everybody, I'm Woody.
So this week, we will be reacting to one of his latest videos where he talks about a cave, basically an underwater cave in Australia that is very famous. And some people have died there, like in a lot of caves that we dive even as well here in Florida. You haven't seen this video, of course. I think I started watching and then I stopped because I wanted to react for real for the first time. I think, for those of you who don't know Mr. Ballen, which I think a lot of you do, he's a former Navy SEAL. As you know, SEAL stands for Sea, Air, and Land. They have they go through training called BUTS, basic underwater demolition training, demolition SEAL training. And during that training, one of the stages of the training is diving. They learn how to dive. They're combat divers, right? They go into places underwater. So John Allen, who's his name, Mr. Ballen, he is a diver because he's a SEAL. Like, SEALs are divers. But I don't think he's a cave diver. And I think he tells a lot of stories about cave diving because obviously they're scary. That's his, he's really good at telling stories. And we'll see how accurate the cave diving part is in this story. Again, I only caught like the first 3 minutes and then I stopped.
Okay.
So we'll see how it goes.
By the way, please subscribe to us.
In 1938,
Yes,
a farmer in southeastern Australia decided to bring his horses to a watering hole on the other side of his large property. As he was leading the horses across this big, wide open field, one of his horses suddenly just collapsed to the ground. The farmer ran over to see what was going on, but as soon as he got over to it, the horse had stood back up again and seemed totally unhurt. The farmer was puzzled because he had no idea why the horse fell in the first place, and so he looked down to see if maybe it tripped on something, and he saw on the ground right beneath the horse was this small hole. And so he moved his horse out of the way, and then when he came back to look at this thing, he saw it was only maybe a foot across, but when he peered down into it, he saw it was very deep. And so he got down on his hands and knees to get a closer look, and when his eyes adjusted, he could not believe what he was seeing. 10 or 15 feet below the surface was this huge pool of clear water. The horse had just stepped into the roof of an underground cave. And so the farmer was really excited to see how big this cave was. And so he grabbed all his horses and he brought them back to the stable, and he got this long measuring rope with a weight at the end of it. So he runs back out to the hole, he puts the weight into the hole, and he begins paying out this rope. And so down it goes, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. It just keeps on going and going until finally the weight hits solid land at 120 feet. And so the farmer is like, wow, this is a huge cave. So he pulls it back up thinking that's the bottom, but in reality it wasn't. It actually extended down almost 300 additional feet. The farmer and his horse had just accidentally found one of the most beautiful and deadly freshwater caves in the world, called the Shaft. The reason it's called the Shaft is because the only way in or out of this underwater cave is through this hole in the middle of this field that this horse created.
This is the real
real
hole,
shaft
by the way.
that goes down 18 feet until it reaches the surface
So
of
they
this
have
massive underground.
when we do dry caving, we don't have ladders like you see in this video.
Yeah.
So they obviously built one. Instead, what we do, and they do this to keep people out of it, frankly, is we drop a rope like that, but we also use what's called an ascender system. So that when you're going back up, imagine you have this device where you lift up the top part and then you bend your knees and you push up so that you lift up, bend your knees, and push up. And it takes some coordination to do that.
Nightmare.
It's like push up, bend your knees, ascend.
Yeah.
And when you're ascending, that top part is locked, holding you down to let you descend. Push up, lock that off, bend your knees, push up. So it's like you're wenching yourself all the way up. I've had to do this a number of times. So you have to practice
So much easier to swim, right? If
yeah,
it was
well,
underwater.
that's how you get in, okay? I'm just saying there's a lot of dry caving where that's the only way you can get in is by bringing your own rope and then ascend
to get
back out. But guess they've made a ladder system in this one.
Well, it's like a rope ladder of some kind.
Body of water. The opening to this shaft is so narrow that cave divers, they can't get into it with their gear on their backs. So they literally need to be lowered into this cave by themselves, and then their gear is lowered down after them, and they put it on while they're treading water. The solid ground that the farmer's weighted line had touched at 120 feet when he believed he had reached the bottom of the cave, what he had actually touched was the top of something called the rock pile. The rock pile is basically this huge underwater pyramid that looks like a rock pile that sits at the bottom in the middle of this huge underwater cave. And
this is, by the way, how Eagle's Nest, which is a very popular cave, also deadly here in Florida, really deep cave, is. They have a rock pile, and at the tip of the rock pile, which is around, I think it's like 120, something like that.
Deep.
It's pretty deep. Is the sign for this is a cave, don't go any further. So like if you're an open circuit, first of all, if you're an open circuit diver, do not go to Eagle's Nest. Don't even not even to take pictures. But if you happen to be a cavern diver or something like that, I guess you could go all the way to the tip of the pile and then get out. Because anything beyond that, it's a cave.
From the top of this rock pile, you can go down it in all different directions, but once you get to the bottom, there's only 2 tunnels to choose from. There's one that goes west, basically down at an angle that dead ends at 260 feet. And then on the other side of this underwater pyramid is the eastern tunnel, and that's much more treacherous. It goes down at a more steep angle to 400 feet. The few elite divers that have explored the deepest recesses of this cave say there are 3 distinct stages to it.
So
Stage
it's 400
1 is
feet
from the
underwater?
surface down to 120 feet, the top of the rock pile. During this stage,
So
the diver
trimix
swims
only.
unobstructed in beautiful clear water with sunlight poking through the hole. It's a very easy section of the cave.
Wow.
And there's a safety line that's anchored from the surface straight down to the top of the rock pile. So you have something to hold on to as you go down and back up. Stage 2 is where things get a bit dicey. Stage 2 begins at the top of the rock pile and extends down all the way to the bottom of the westerly tunnel at 260 feet where it dead ends, or down to the 200-foot mark of the easterly tunnel where you come to something called the drop-off ledge. And it's quite literally a ledge in the middle of this tunnel where beyond it there's a fairly steep drop-off, and it leads down to an area that's so treacherous it's got its own stage. Starting with stage 2 and then with stage 3, there is no safety line to guide you in the direction you need to go. So you're on your own as soon as you reach the top of the rock pile.
So there's no line laid in there by anybody?
That's what he's saying. I find it hard to believe because it's such a popular cave in Australia. But even if there's no line, bring your own line, right? That's what we bring, reels.
No, but yes, we could bring our own line, but
Right.
nobody's laid a main line through that so-called treacherous section. Is that it? Do you know? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't been there.
I'm sure people know out there.
Yes.
And will comment on that.
For sure.
Maybe the line is laid now. I don't know.
Yeah, but when he says you're on your own, you don't really have to be on your own. You can bring your own line. That's what we have reels.
In fact, you would never, ever
Or you
go
violate the
beyond
rules.
the line. You would only tie off.
Right. And keep going with your own line.
Make your way down any direction you want down the rock pile until you reach either of these tunnels, and as soon as you go into them, you immediately start to lose visibility because the sunlight cannot penetrate all the way into these tunnels. And so the diver becomes increasingly reliant on their flashlight. As such, they have to be very careful as they navigate down stage 2 to not bump into the walls, because doing so will knock the limestone silt off of the walls. It will create a cloud of it in their face. It will blind them. It's like being in fog, where a flashlight can't push through it. And so the diver has to either wait for the silt to clear, which could take a very long time, or they have to swim blind. Also, anyone entering stage 2 and stage 3, they can't breathe regular air out of their tanks. There's too much nitrogen in regular air. The deeper you dive, the more nitrogen your body will absorb, and if you have too much nitrogen in your system, it can give you something called nitrogen narcosis, which is like being really drunk. And in extreme cases, people have been known to take their mouthpiece out and inhale water, believing leaving there on the surface, or they'll confuse the direction up with the direction down, and to get to the surface, they will swim straight down until it's too late and they can't get back up again. And so divers that are going to be in stage 2 or stage 3 of this cave will breathe a special mix of gases that are low in nitrogen. The final stage of the shaft, stage 3, is just from the 200-foot mark of the easterly cave, so that drop-off ledge, all the way down to the bottom at 400 feet. This stage is unbelievably dangerous. As soon as you drop off that ledge, all the sunlight goes away.
This looks awesome, by the way.
Black,
look at this picture.
The tunnel narrows considerably and stays incredibly narrow.
I mean,
in fact,
I want
many
to dive
times
this.
divers have to squeeze themselves past
So
sections
can
where
you
the
stop
rocks
it a
are
second?
too close together.
So I don't know, and we can research it afterwards. I know we'll get comments on this. Are people diving this cave regularly? Is this a popular cave to dive?
You can apply for a permit, and if you have like the right credentials, which we do, we should be able to dive it.
So it's in a park?
It's on private property.
Oh, it is.
But they allow you to dive.
It's in Australia.
In Australia. I remember because I thought Mike Young, who we've featured in these videos before, has been there. And I had some questions for him. I'm like, is it true that there's no line? Like, I wanted to ask him a few questions. And he was like, I've never been to Australia. So I'm like, well, maybe we should go to Australia and dive this cave.
Yeah,
it looks awesome.
Not only dive it, I want to know more about it. Is it a spring? Is it a siphon?
Yeah.
Can we bring our scooters? And how do we look? How much gear are we going to need if this is 200 or 400 foot in depth? We're gonna have to stage gas.
Yeah,
a lot of gas.
It looks epic.
This would be a big setup.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, like everything he said so far is accurate, which
really
is great. And there's a lot of people that make comments in our videos, like for example, like with the Donald Cerrone video, for example, they say, well, he's exaggerating and saying these things because he knows that the people watching him are not cave divers and they're not going to be able to tell if it's, technically accurate what he's saying. But he's making stuff up, like on the video. Like, makes no sense.
Clearly.
This guy is engaging an audience of non-cave divers. He has millions of subscribers, and he's being factually correct.
Really?
So you can still tell a really good story without being a cave diver yourself, to non-cave divers, and keep it real.
I love that point, Gus. Yeah,
reality is awesome.
That is
anyway.
I'm so glad you said that because Donald Cerrone was, I know he has a lot of supporters that commented back to us and kind of got on us, called us a-holes and so forth. Look, it's not a matter of being an a-hole. The purpose of Dive Talk really partially is to educate and convey accurate information. We're going to react and we're going to call out things that are just factually untrue. I know I was brutal to the mortician. I think I was in a bad mood that day, but I'm like...
Very early we recorded that video.
Yeah, very early in the morning. That's not for me. But also, if you do watch her again, it's like she kept saying like, every time you go cave diving, you're going to bump into dead bodies. Yeah. And that just bothered me so badly because that's not true.
Or the fact that it's like, oh, you're going to dive alone in a dark cave. Like, no, we don't dive alone, and we have 4 lights each. Like, where are you going to be, like, in a dark cave? Like, and he even made it sound like that. It's like, well, as divers go past this thing, they depend on their light. Yes, we depend on our light, but it's not a scary thing. Like, we have 4 lights, and they're awesome.
He's doing a really good job.
Have you ever switched to your backup light, your first backup light, on a rail dive?
Nope, never had to.
Never, right? Me neither. Like, I've always used my primary, never had to switch to a backup, and we still have 2 more backups after our backup.
Yes.
So the whole idea of relying on the light is not a scary thing. He also mentioned, like, if the cave gets silted out, you're going to have to, swim blind. That's not a scary thing either. We okay the line. That's why we have a line. We can follow the line even in total silt out. So for real cave divers, that's not super scary. It's not prefer. I rather see the cave and everything than being on a silt out. I'm not saying that I love it when I can't see anything. No, of course not. But it's not a scary thing. Like, it's just part of diving.
And so because you're inherently bumping into the walls all through stage 3, you're pretty much guaranteed to be silted out the entire time. At this depth, nitrogen narcosis is virtually guaranteed, even if you're breathing a special low nitrogen mix of gases. And so divers need to be ready to abort the dive at...
I know we have to comment.
Yeah.
I know.
At some point, he was bound to miss something.
Well, we calculate what's called our END.
That's right.
I don't want to get into the technicalities of that, but I like to call END your equivalent nitrogen depth.
No, you call it the equivalent NARC depth.
I also call it the equivalent NARC depth. Right. How NARCed do you want to feel in this dive? Once you say, I want to feel no more than 100 feet as if I was breathing regular air of being NARCed, you then can calculate through formulas what amount of helium you need to introduce into the mixture such that you will only feel that NARCed. So there's a real science here. Therefore, why am I saying that? Because he said no matter what, you're going to feel, or he said you're absolutely, or you're guaranteed, I think he said, to feel extremely NARCed. Well,
no.
I would have to look at the formula for if you go to 300 or 400 feet, what amount of helium would you need to only feel 100 foot of depth of NARCed? I don't have that readily available.
But I mean, I can use my own, as an example. When we went down to 248 feet, I think my END was 60. Like, I felt like I was diving at 60 feet or 20 meters, even though I was at 248.
You feel totally clear with helium.
It feels perfect. Like, diving at 60 feet it's amazing. So you're not guaranteed to get nitrogen narcosis. Absolutely not. You're guaranteed to get nitrogen narcosis if you're breathing air at that depth, but not if you're breathing the right mix with the right END.
I would say at 400 feet, if you were breathing regular air, you would be completely out of your mind. It wouldn't even be NARCed anymore. You would be probably die.
Yeah. Well, the last dive of Sheck Exley, I was reading about this, and I think I sent it to you. Their END, they were diving to over, I think it was 860 feet. It was way deeper than 400. Their END was 280. What? Like, total imagine confusion. At 800 plus feet that you feel like you're diving on air at 280 feet. Mm-mm. Like, it's insane. Like, you have a problem and you die. It's crazy. Well, and he died. Best diver ever died.
Any moment if they feel symptoms coming on. Once the diver has turned around and is making their return trip, but they're still in the third stage section of the cave, they need to be careful of false stones. These are offshoots on the ceiling only in this third stage that look like the way out.
Because there's no
line. Especially
when
things are silted out
that's
and
what
it's dark,
he's saying,
you're low in oxygen, you might be panicking.
But you have
very
a line.
Easy to confuse these.
But I knew you were going to look at me
because...
because...
But in fact, these false stones are exactly what their name implies.
He set this up as if there's no line. We would never do that. That's why Gus looked at me just now like... Because we would never do that. Listen, there's a rule. I'm not going to repeat the 5 rules of cave diving, but one of the main ones... Always have a line, in fact, a guideline all the way back to the surface. So that rule is never violated, and then this would not be a discussion in this video.
I mean, on regular caves where they without false stumps, there's tunnels. They go in different ways. Like, you're coming back, and there's multiple ways to go. Guess what? You follow your line, and you don't get lost. So, yeah, he's making it sound like, oh, there's just false stumps. You might, let me go on this one and see what. No.
Well, did he dive this without a line? Is that what he's saying?
No, he's not. I don't think he's a cave diver.
So he's just describing it without having dove this.
Right.
Okay.
Nowhere. Stage 3 is reserved exclusively for extremely experienced cave divers who get special permission. In 1973,
we're not extremely
8 divers
experienced,
got
but
permission
I think
to
we
dive
can get
the
permission.
first and second stages
I want to
of
do
the
it
shaft
with
cave. They did not get permission
some other
to dive
folks
the
besides
third
just
stage
us.
of the cave. On May 28th of that year, the 8 divers arrived in that big open field near the cave opening and began prepping their gear. Their plan was to dive down all the way to the edge of the drop-off ledge, so looking into the third stage. And then once they got there, look around for a minute, and then turn around and head back up to the surface. These 8 divers were experienced divers, but their experience was all in open water environments. None of them had dove in a cave. And so they were confident divers,
what do you think is about to happen?
They were a little bit naive.
Listen, so
they believed the dive down to the edge of the third stage was
Can
going
you
to be
stop it
fairly
for 1
routine
second? I'll
and
make
would
it
be
brief.
simple and fun.
Listen, zero chance, zero, that somebody that is a non-cave diver with no cave dive experience should be in there. This is an easy conversation. Comment is over. Zero chance, none. Do not even remotely think about going in a cave, let alone a cave of this depth, without cave dive certification.
Absolutely.
That's it. There's nothing else to discuss.
Yeah, as soon as he said 8 people showed up, they're open water divers, and they're going into this cave, I'm like, well, you know what's about to happen.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not going to end
Before any of them had even gotten into the water, they had already made a critical mistake.
Yes.
Instead of jamming their bottle with the special low nitrogen mixed gas that they would need
Called
since they were
Trimix,
going
by the way.
into stage 2, and so that's a requirement. Instead of doing that, they just jammed their bottles with regular air. So they were basically guaranteeing that they would get nitrogen narcosis.
That's
But
true.
Once they had all their gear prepped, they made their way over to the entrance to the shaft, and one by one they were lowered down into the water, and their gear would follow. And then once all of them were all jocked up, they grabbed the safety line and they began their descent. It only took about 2 minutes to get down to the top of the rock pile, and there they spent about 5 minutes taking pictures of each other before heading down the eastern tunnel.
I want
3
that
of the
photo
divers
of
were
being
siblings,
lowered down.
Glenn, Stephen, and Christine, who were 25, 22, and 19 respectively. And Glenn remembers after they made their way
25,
all the way
22,
down
19.
the eastern tunnel and they reached the drop-off ledge, he remembers seeing his sister, his brother, and all the other divers. Everyone seemed just fine.
beautiful.
Everyone's just looking over this ledge. They're taking turns, kind of peering down into this black abyss that is stage 3. And then after 5 minutes or so, Glenn looked at his gauge and he saw his air was getting fairly low. Not emergency situation, but it was time to leave. And everybody else had the same amount of air as he did. And so everybody else was running low on air. And so
Well,
Glenn was
different
about to
sack
grab
rates.
his sister, who was several feet right in front of him. She was still looking over the ledge down into stage 3. But when he reached out to grab her, she and all the other divers just suddenly jumped forward and dove straight down into the abyss out of sight. They dove into the stage.
By the way, why does this diver not have fins? I just noticed that. Isn't that weird?
I've never seen that before. That's insane. One other thing, though, that I'm noticing now that you stopped it here is that he did say that the original plan was to stay in the cavern zone and not go into the cave because, again, they're not cave certified. Beyond that sign, there's no more light penetration from the surface. That turns it into a cave. If you stay in front of that sign, there's light penetration from the surface, thereby being called a cavern. Even cavern, you shouldn't be in without proper certification.
Yeah.
You should have a cavern certification, but
That's right.
definitely not beyond that sign. So the plan apparently was not to go into the cave.
Don't go into the cave. Hopefully they have lights. Let's see how it goes.
Dove straight down into the abyss out of sight. They dove into the stage 3 section. This was not something that Glenn was tracking anybody doing. This was not something anyone said they were going to do. This was not part of the dive. This was very dangerous, and they weren't allowed to go down there.
True.
And so Glenn immediately swam down after them to try to grab his sister and stop her, or grab his brother, or grab any of them. But as soon as he went over that ledge, he saw it was totally pitch black and it was completely silted out from all these divers suddenly launching over the edge. And so Glenn knows he's not going to find them in the silt. It's also very dangerous for him alone to just dive down there.
All
and
true.
So he figures, you know what? I'm sure they're fine. They probably planned this out.
I'm sure they're fine.
And they're just going to go down a little ways and they'll come back up again. And so I'll just go to the rock pile and wait for them. And so
By
Glenn
the way,
turns around.
stop.
And he
That comment that he made is a reoccurring theme. I'm just going to go into the cave a little bit. We've heard this on a bunch of videos you and I have reacted to. And that'll be fine. I'll just turn around and come out. Some of them, by miracle, found their way out, and we've reacted like, wow, that was lucky. Going into the cave a little bit, in your mind, not too far, can be deadly. Don't go into the cave. Not a little bit, not 1 foot. Don't go beyond the sign.
Yeah.
Please. I mean, I'm trying to tell people don't do this unless you're cave trained, certified, and planned for that particular dive.
Up back over the drop-off ledge. He makes his way to the rock pile, and he just sits there facing the eastern tunnel, waiting for his brother, his sister, and the other divers to come back out again. But they don't. And finally, his air gauge gets so low that he literally has to go to the surface. And he's thinking to himself, if my air is this low, what are they doing down there? 24-year-old Larry Reynolds was one of the divers that went with Glenn's sister and brother and the other 2 divers into this forbidden 3rd stage section of the cave. Although he doesn't say this, it sounded like he and the others just wanted to go a little ways into this off-limit section, check it out, and then turn around and go back to the surface. And so Larry would say, as soon as they went over the ledge and they're in this third stage, it went completely pitch black and the tunnel immediately constricted dramatically. And so as they're going down this very tight and pitch black tunnel, they reach a section that's so tight, they're down on their stomachs, literally pulling themselves through. And so after a few minutes of the group forcing themselves into this unbelievably dangerous place, it's like they all collectively realized, this is a terrible idea. We need to turn back. And so as they all began turning around, they realized their return trip just back up to the drop-off ledge, which was only maybe 25 feet, was completely silted out. And so Larry is in the back of this return trip line, and right in front of him is Christine. And so as soon as they all make their way into the silt, the only thing Larry can see with his flashlight is Christine's fins. And so he's staying right up on her and keeping his light on that fin to make sure he's going in the right direction.
I don't know how she got her fins back on.
After only a few moments, Christine's fins just suddenly disappear. And so Larry's thinking, I don't know where she went, but I don't have enough time. I have almost no air. And so he just keeps on swimming, believing he's going the right way. And sure enough, he clears out of the silt and he goes up and back over the drop-off ledge, and he shines his light back up the eastern tunnel, back up towards the rock pile, expecting to see Christine and the other divers he was just with. But he's looking and there's no one there. There's no silt. It's totally clear. And there's not one diver in front of him. And so he looks at his gauge again and he's got a little bit of air, enough to maybe go down and make sure nobody is still down there. Because he's thinking, I don't think it's possible they could have swam all the way through this tunnel in this space of time. So he turns around, he goes back over the drop-off ledge, back into the silt, and as he's moving very slowly and cautiously, up ahead he sees flashlights moving around on the ceiling of the tunnel. And so he moves down towards this flashing light, and he realizes the light is coming from inside of a false dome right above him. No. And so he looks up, and he saw there was Christine and another man named Roberts, who was 28, frantically swimming around, shining their lights, looking for the way out, not realizing they're in this dead end. And so Larry was about to shine his light to get their attention when Larry's flashlight went out. And so now Larry is in complete darkness. He is completely silted out. He doesn't even know how much air he has left because he can't shine the light on it. And so he's starting to panic. He starts banging on his flashlight, and finally the light comes back on. And when it does, he shines it straight up again to try to shine it towards Christine and Roberts, but he had drifted farther down the tunnel. And so by the time he shined his light, he wasn't underneath the false dome. But when he shined his light in the other direction, he saw he was at the very far end of where the group had gone. And so farther down into stage 3 was clear. There was no silt. And so he shined his light down into the stage 3 tunnel. And way down the tunnel, barely visible, he sees there is one diver with his flashlight out swimming the wrong direction down into oblivion. His name was John, he was 20 years old, and he almost certainly had nitrogen narcosis. Larry knew he could not save him, and so Larry turned around and went back into the silt, back up in the direction of the rock pile, touching the ceiling, looking for that entrance into the false dome to try to help Christine and Roberts. But he's not finding it, and he's looking at his air gauge, and it's getting critically low, and he knows if he doesn't go soon, he's going to die. And so at some point, after not finding the entrance to this false dome, he decides he just has to go out and save himself. And so he manages to get out of the silt. He goes up and over the drop-off ledge. He gets to the rock pile. He grabs the safety line, and he fins himself up to the surface. And when he gets to the surface, he looks around, and there's only 3 other divers up there, one of which is Glenn. And Glenn, he looks visibly panicked, and he yells to Larry, "Hey, have you seen my brother and my sister? Have you seen the others? Are they coming up after you?" And Larry looks at him and just shakes his head. He didn't know what to say. He knew they were gone. But for Glenn, this was his baby brother, his baby sister. He had to go back down. And so with the little bit of air he had left, he put his mouthpiece in, he turned around, and he dove straight down as fast as he could, staring towards the opening of the eastern tunnel, praying that his family members, that his friends are going to come out of there. But as he's swimming down and he's running out of air, no one was coming out of that tunnel. And so finally, when his air was basically empty, he had to turn around. And on that return trip back to the surface, he realized his siblings and his 2 friends were gone. It would take 11 months
after
and
this
11
video
days
is
to
over.
finally
Stop it a second. When this video is over, you know, I was sitting here thinking that we're going to scare people off from ever wanting to cave dive.
Right.
And what I would like to do, and I'll let it play out here because I think he's done an incredible job of telling the story, and with a lot of mostly good facts. I want to tell people cave diving's awesome and can be made to how do I word this? I'm stuck for words. I don't want to say can be made safe. It can be made to have an incredible experience in a way that where you follow procedures that allows you to do it successfully over and over and over again if you never violate one of the 5 rules of cave diving. Yeah. So don't be scared of cave diving because of these videos and our reactions. Our reactions are always pointing out what you shouldn't do. Maybe we should do one that just goes through a cave dive training of this is what you should do every time. And frankly, they're actually kind of mellow and relaxing. Think about our cave dives, Gus.
Yeah.
They're super chilled. We don't have silt outs. We don't have low on air situations. Right. We don't get lost in the cave. Have you been lost in the cave yet? Ever on one of your cave dives?
No.
Never. So please understand that normally it's just go in, look around, look at the beautiful formations. Everything's great. You turn around, you come back out. It's not like this.
Right. And I also want to make sure that people understand that this is not about us as people. Like, I think you made a comment earlier today and said, if you're not cave trained, do not go a foot into that cave.
No.
But the other thing that was important that you pointed out is that you plan for the cave. What that means is that if I get to a cave and I'm just wearing like open circuit and I have no reels and no multiple lights and I don't have the gear, even though I'm a cave certified, I should not go into the cave because I'm not ready for it. So this has nothing to do with the diver itself. This is not like, oh, Gus and Woody are like superhuman divers, exactly, and that's why they can do it. No, there's actually more to it than just being cave certified. You have to have the right gear, the right plan, the right gas. There's way more to it. So just strapping a tank and being cave certified doesn't make it safe for you to go cave diving. There's way more to it than that.
Recover all 4 of the bodies inside of the cave. John, the 20-year-old who Larry saw swimming in the wrong direction, was found fairly far down the eastern tunnel laying on a rocky outcropping. Glenn's 22-year-old brother Stephen was found just 50 feet from the entrance of the shaft, but it's believed he died at a much lower depth and then floated up to that position. Glenn's 19-year-old sister, Christine, and the 28-year-old man, Roberts, that she was with inside of the false dome were found embracing each other just under the false dome inside of the tunnel.
Wow.
Investigators believe when they were in there, they couldn't find the exit and then realized that they had so little air that even if they found the exit, they would not get out in time. And so knowing they were just minutes away from death, they abandoned looking for the exit and instead just embraced each other while they died. And then afterwards, they floated down and out of the false dome. After this tragedy, the shaft was permanently closed.
Are you wondering if that's
divers.
true? You're looking at me like, I mean, I don't have any reason to doubt it.
I mean, I love you, bro, but I don't know if I had a few minutes of air, if I'm gonna just embrace you and like let's just hug and die.
I'm gonna give you a handshake. See ya, dude. It's been real.
Not even a fist bump. Like we keep swimming until we find the exit, or we die swimming. I don't have time to embrace.
By the way, that is it's actually a very good point you're making. That is a thought philosophy.
Yes.
Don't give up. Don't give up. I mean, don't give up if you trying to get out of the cave, trying to survive.
Yeah.
Until you die. Don't give up.
There's another episode I want to do because there's this, I feel, is an urban legend, all right, that they found divers inside caves that stabbed themselves in the heart because they didn't want to drown.
No way. Really?
It sounds so ridiculous to me that I will be like, oh my God, I have 5 more minutes of air, but I don't want to drown. So instead of continue to look for an exit, let me stab myself.
No. Come on. I don't believe that.
It's just so dumb.
No, you don't give...
You know what? Like, people swear by it. And apparently there's like a guy in Croatia who they found with a knife in his chest. And the police investigated and they were like, no, this was suicide. This guy thought he was going to drown. And he'd rather stab himself in the heart rather than drown. That sounds ridiculous. Plus, when you stab yourself, like even if you're a surgeon, a heart surgeon like Doug, that you're going to stab yourself and immediately die... You'll probably start agonizing from pain and then drown while agonizing from pain from the stab, realizing how stupid that was.
I can't even imagine.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, don't give up as the message here.
For
This
sure.
was worth the reaction at this point when he said they were embracing each other. I'm glad you
embracing
stopped
each
it
other?
there because we would not give up. We're just going to keep on trying.
For sure.
But, man, it's just so simple, this one. Don't go in. They simply were not cave trained. Read the sign. You stopped it. It's funny you stopped it on the Grim Reaper.
Yep.
It tells you some interesting information on that sign. Stop and prevent your death. Go no further. It also talks about that there were more than X amount of divers that died. It says you need to be trained and you have to have the proper equipment to cave dive, which you said a second ago.
Yep.
And without cave training and equipment, divers can die here. It can happen to you and so forth and so on. So they obviously made this sign over time based upon instances where people are continuing to dive by not being trained properly, not having the right equipment. I mean, I know what I'm saying just seems like a repeat of what we've said over and over.
Yeah.
But it's worthy of saying again.
For sure.
But years later, they would reopen it. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the
well
secret
said.
in today's episode,
Well
let us
done.
know in the comments.
Absolutely. And I can see why people subscribe to Mr. Ballen. He does a really good job telling stories, of
Yes.
course. One of those stories he told, by the way, will be also reacted to by the person who happens to be the protagonist of the story.
That's awesome.
So we are very, very excited to record that one. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to learn from some of these videos. Next week we're going to be reviewing one that it's not in a cave. So, we've had 2 cave diving incidents in a row. The next week, the video next week will not be in a cave, but super interesting nonetheless. This was sent to us by one of our buddies, Brian.
Yeah. And I just gave you a tremendous amount of content on my return that I just had from a epic meg shark tooth hunting trip. And I got lots of teeth to give away to you on our next live stream.
Yes.
And then finally, Gus, we are getting a lot of demand for create our own videos that we can react to. So we're going to go underwater. We're going to reenact some things. And that's coming up. I really want to get the one done with where we cut the lines, the high pressure, the low pressure hose, see which one drains faster.
We really got to take like a week and just go and do
we
all
have
of
a lot
these
of that stuff to do.
experiments.
And experiments. We still have to follow up on the David Shaw video. I want to rectify some thoughts there.
Yeah.
That's coming. We have a lot to do, but lots of content. I just downloaded to Gus underwater content from the recent Meg Tooth trip I just did. Some of this content is hilarious, by the way. Not just interesting, but pretty funny. So lots of good stuff coming up, everybody.
All right, guys, thank you so much once again for watching. And if you're, binge watching these videos, a lot of people seem to be finding us on YouTube and then watching all of our videos. If you haven't subscribed by now, please go ahead and do that. One of the messages that I get constantly from YouTube is that the more our subscribers watch our videos, the more they're recommended to non-subscribers, to other people out there that haven't found them. So if you like for more people to learn about cave diving and, learn more from us and be able to enjoy the content that you're enjoying, please subscribe and click the like button on the videos as well. It really helps us out. For now, looking forward to next week, the next Cave Divers React. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.